Welcome back to chapter 4. In the next couple of lectures, we're going to take a little bit of a turn and talk about covalent compounds. And then the last one from chapter 4 is going to be a little bit of math as well. So this one's going to be all about covalent. So just to remind you, in this chapter, we're talking about compounds. We're talking about ionic compounds and covalent compounds. So far, we've just talked about ionics. That was a metal and a nonmetal. Electrons were transferred, causing ions coming together, have to be neutral. Now we're going to transition, and the rest of this chapter and really the next two chapters are going to be all about covalent. So covalent is going to be a nonmetal bound to another nonmetal. And in this case, electrons are shared. So the good news here is you don't have to worry about these silly charges. You don't have to figure out what's the charge of the ion, how do I balance them? So that's the good news. The bad news is we can form a multitude of different compounds. So there's going to be other wrinkles in this. Okay. So just kind of a little preview of this. Here's some covalent compounds. So nonmetal. We see hydrogen, which is one of our nonmetals. Even though he's on the left of the periodic table, he's still a nonmetal. And we see oxygen, which is also another nonmetal. So looking down here at the bottom, we start to see some of these nuances. So water, for example, is one oxygen atom bound to two hydrogen atoms. So we know water exists, right? Well, hydrogen peroxide is two oxygen atoms and still only two hydrogen atoms. So we see this, this variety in the number of atoms that can come together. For example, sodium chloride, one sodium, one chlorine, and it cannot be any other combination. We can't have one sodium and two chlorine or two sodium and one chlorine. That just doesn't exist. But with covalent, with this sharing, we start to see this variety come in. Same thing over here with carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. So here we got the black carbon with one oxygen. We've got the black carbon with two oxygen, and we know both of those exist as well. The thing that we're going to focus on in this chapter is not so much how they come together. What we're going to focus on in this chapter is just naming them. We're going to start simple. So when we name covalent compounds, the first thing to do is identify it as covalent. That's going to be your first step. And once you've identified it as covalent, we see that green box and that blue box again, and those should look very, very similar. So for these covalent compounds, we're going to keep the name of the first element. We're not going to do anything to that. And we keep the base name of the second element and add IDE. So that should look very, very similar. The difference here, again, are these yellow boxes. So because we can have this variety of different atoms that come together, we have to tell the viewer how many of each atom we have. So we're going to do that with prefixes. So here's our list of prefixes. So if we see the prefix mono, we know that we have one atom. If we see the prefix tetra, we know we have 4 of that atom. It's a subscript 4. If we see the prefix octa, we know we have 8 of that particular atom. So the subscript's going to be 8. So this is how we tell the viewer how many of each atom that we have. Okay. So let's do some examples. So here's the step. Start with the name of the first element. Add the base name of the second plus IDE, and then add the prefixes. Okay, so I'm going to do the first one with you. So for this one, I'm going to write first the name of each of these elements. Let me get my pen. So the first element is nitrogen. The second element, base name is ox. Then I'm going to add IDE, so oxide. Now we're going to add the prefixes, and I'm just going to put this in a different color just so you guys can see it. When you're working through homework, it can all be the same color. So 2, I see that in this compound, there's 2 nitrogens. So I'm going to write dinitrogen. And I see that there's just 1 oxygen. So I'm going to write the prefix mono. Okay. First little wrinkle here, we wouldn't say the second part of this is monoxide, right? It's kind of a mouthful. Instead, we would say monoxide. So anytime you see these 2 vowels right next to each other, we really drop that second O, and we just call this monoxide. I'm sure when you type that into Pearson, they'll probably help you out with that a little bit. So the name of this compound is dinitrogen monoxide. Okay. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do the name of the second one. All right, so again, the first thing I'm going to do is write the name of the element, so nitrogen. Base name of the second plus IDE. And go back and add my prefixes. So again, we've got 2 nitrogens. That's going to be dinitrogen. And this time we've got 5 oxygens. So that's going to be pent. I got to move this over because I didn't leave enough spot. Pent. Okay. So again, I see a double vowel, and that's a lot to handle. So we wouldn't say pentaoxide. We typically just say pentoxide. Okay. So dinitrogen pentoxide. All right. It's that easy. It really is that easy. That's about as hard as it gets. First little wrinkle was this double vowel thing. So that's the first kind of exception that I have to tell you about. The other is the following. Okay. So think about the name of this compound. Okay. So let's systematically go through. So name of the first element, carbon, base name of the second, plus IDE, oxide. We've got 1 oxygen, so that's going to be monoxide. When we say the name of this, systematically, it tells me that I should have a mono in front of the carbon, right? So I have 1 carbon, I should have a mono in front of there. But when we talk about this compound, do we say monocarbon monoxide? No, we don't. What do we call it? We just call it carbon monoxide. So that's the other little wrinkle that you actually already knew, is we don't start by saying mono. We can start by saying di or tri or penta, right? But we don't start with mono. So we wouldn't say monocarbon monoxide. We just say carbon monoxide. Okay. Another example is this guy right here. So again, we wouldn't say monocarbon dioxide. What would we say? Yeah, just carbon dioxide. So we do not start with the word mono. That's really it for naming covalent compounds. It's not terribly difficult. What tends to get very difficult is when I mix ionic and covalent together and don't tell you. So that's probably going to be the next thing that you're going to want to practice, is finding some sort of worksheet or problems in the book where they're all mixed together. And the first thing you have to decide is it covalent or is it ionic? Hope you guys found this helpful.